Lighting has a powerful effect on our perception of the characters and the events that are happening within the scene. It can tell us where our characters are emotionally, where they've been, and can even give us hints as to where they're going. And the crazy thing is, if done well, the audience won't even notice it and will continue to be fully immersed in the story with our characters. But what's even better than that is that you could do this too. And today I'm going to show you how, starting with a very simple technique called 3-point lighting, and how you could utilize it to elevate your next film. So let's get into it, friends. Hey, what's happening, everyone? My name is Ryan, and if you're new with us, welcome. I truly appreciate you being here. Now, I actually created a whole scene to further illustrate this technique so that you could see it in action. But before we do that, let's answer the main question, and that is, what is 3-point lighting and how could you use it in your films? In its most basic form, 3-point lighting consists of 3 main lights: your key light, a fill light, and a backlight. Now, you definitely don't have to stop there. You could absolutely add more lights in, but a really great place to start on a film set is with 3-point lighting to create some of the lighting that's gonna motivate some of the other lights within the scene. Your key light is gonna be your main light on your subject. Your fill light is gonna fill in any shadows that you might need within the scene, and your backlight is gonna create a hair light or a rim light to help separate your characters or your subject from the background. Now, you definitely don't have to stop here. You could absolutely add additional lighting to this. However, this is a really great place to start. So now that we know the basics of what 3-point lighting is, how can you use it for your film? When lighting any scene, there are 3 main things to keep in mind. Number 1 is motivation. Number 2, light placement or angle. And number 3, contrast ratio. Now, I know that's a lot to take in, but let me explain. Motivation is simply walking in the room and asking yourself, what is the natural ambient light that's already spilling into this room? Ambient light could be anything from a window to a floor lamp, or even something more stylistic like this that was created for the exact purpose of motivating this blue light on the face, but we're gonna get into that later on in the video. Let's say you have a window right next to your subject. Well, you could use that window light to justify the light that you're gonna use as your key light on your subject. But now that we found our motivation, we then just need to place our light or angle our studio lights in the same direction as our ambient light. Now, it doesn't have to be exactly the same direction as the window, but definitely in a spot that looks like it's natural within the scene and that light is coming in and lighting up our subject's face from the window light. Doing this is gonna make your scene feel more realistic and more believable to the audience, further keeping the audience within the story. After placement, you're gonna wanna think through contrast ratio. The contrast ratio of your scene is determined by how stark the highlights and the shadows are from each other. If you have an even lit scene, that is typically called high key lighting or a low contrast scene. If you have very stark highlights and shadows to create more of a moody style scene, this is called low key lighting and also referenced as a high contrast scene. You would typically use high key lighting if you're creating a happy, well lit type of scene, and if you're looking for something a little bit more moody or there's more drama within the scene, you typically would want to go for something like low key lighting or high contrast. This could also create a lot of depth and layers within the scene, giving it more dynamic and making it feel a little bit more as if we're there with the characters. But now that we've motivated our key light and have established our contrast ratio within the scene, how can we add backlighting into all this? Well, once again, you're gonna want to motivate this light off of things that are already in the room and set it at the same color temperature, and this is going to justify that light and further enhancing this scene and further separating your character from the background. With any of these decisions, you're going to want to make them based on what's best for the story. It really all boils down to that, so definitely consider the story before making any of these decisions. Okay, this is actually day 2 of the recording of this video. I had actually planned on filming this segment right after I filmed this lighting setup that I'm about to break down for you. But then of course work stuff came up and family and life happened. And so, okay, so just like I promised, I created a whole scene so that I could break it down for you so that you can see this 3-point lighting technique in action. Let's start with our key light. But before I can get into my key lighting, I first need to establish the story. Here's what I mean. Now, I didn't actually have a a story for this setup. I just put together this lighting setup so that I can illustrate the 3-point lighting technique in a very unique and stylistic way. So I had to come up with a reason for what I was doing. And so the quick story is this. I have a content creator who is watching content on his TV, but then feels inspired to look at his own videos in comparison to the content he's consuming. I don't know. It may not make sense, but there you go. My idea for this was to have a very stylistic, futuristic style scene. And so I figured, why not? So as you can see here in the final shot, he has a hologram for his phone so that he can go through his content and start watching his content. The light from this hologram is going to be the light that motivates our key light. For our key light, I just use this small tube light. It's made by Ambitful. It's the A2, and I set it to a blue color. Now I talk about this light a lot, so I'm not gonna get into huge detail. However, it is an RGB light and it's super bright, so it worked really well for this scene. I just tilted it over to its side and placed it on the very far side on my right, just to give me a little bit more depth in my face. So that way I had more of a shadow side on one end and a lit side on the other. This is gonna provide a much higher contrast ratio for the scene, which is what I was going for. Okay, so now that I've established my key light, how do I fill in the shadows that I want to fill in? Well, I didn't want to lift the shadows too much. So what I did for this is I just set up this Aperture 120D. This is a more powerful light, especially in comparison to this tube light. However, I needed something a little bit more powerful because I'm going to be bouncing it off the wall and back onto our subject. Now I did put a softbox on it. This is the 6090 made by Aperture. Not important. None of the gear in this breakdown is important. Actually, you could use whatever you have as long as it's going to output enough power for you to complete the scene. So I just put this light at 100% and pointed it at the corner of the lit side of the subject. So that way it bounces off that corner and comes right back on the key light. And it's also filling in the room a little bit too. So it's lifting the shadows on the shadow side, but not too much to where you lose that moody feel and those layers that we've developed already. So now that we have our fill light established, let's talk about how I backlit the subject. So again, we just want to motivate the backlight, our artificial lighting, with whatever's in the room. And in this case, I had this lamp right next to me, right behind me. So I use that as a motivation for the next light that I bring in, which is the Aperture 60X. And I picked this because it's a bicolor light. You could use a color temperature orange gel, a CTO, and this would also do the trick. I've done this in the past in some of my other videos. If you'd like to check this setup out, I'll leave links in the description below. But this little light did really well. For this, I just stuck another softbox on it. This is the Aperture Light Dome Mini 2, and I just put that on and faced it towards me, behind me, to light up my shoulder a little bit and set the color temperature to match this lamp that was behind me. And that is what's backlighting me and also giving me this rim light or a hair light to really help me to stand out from the background. If I didn't have this light, it would be super dark in the background and it would make all of the rest of the lighting look a little sourcey. Sourcey meaning that it just looks studio lit. What I love about this technique is that it is super simple to do, and because I know that you are dedicated to the craft of filmmaking and lighting and shaping light for your scenes, I know that you got this. It may be a lot to take in at first, but with a few reps and some practice, I know that you're gonna get this down no problem. But it's not enough to just learn about a new technique. You definitely have to get out there and use these techniques as often as you can to really fully comprehend what they could do and the power of what they could do in all of your films. So I just want to encourage you to take these techniques, practice them often, find some family members or some friends, and just get out there and make your film. Well, that's gonna do it for me, you guys. Thank you so much for joining me in this video. If you like this video or you learned something, please click the like button down below. Consider subscribing if you haven't already, and I'll catch you in the next one. Cheers, friends.